Greetings, everyone. If you're here to learn more about urbanization, buildings, and the effect on human health and the microbiome, you've come to the right place. The most exciting video on YouTube. Let's kick it off. So, in environmental health, we've talked about the concept of the ecosystem and the role that it plays in um, human health. The ecosystem being a complex collection of plants, animals, living things, non living things, all kind of working together in a complex network or web. Shrinking it down, we each have essentially our own internal ecosystems known as the microbiome. This is a collection of microorganisms that live within each of us. And just like an ecosystem in the external world can be tipped out of balance, can be disturbed, and when disturbances happen, we can link these usually to different health issues. So let's first talk about the indoor microbiome. If you're watching this, you're most likely in a room. If you look around you, you're surrounded by the room's microbiome. So we each have our own um, collection of bacteria, fungi, viruses, etc. These organisms live on our skin, inside of our body, and may be as unique as our fingerprints. So we each have essentially a unique microbiome. Some of these microbes are good for us, and some of them are potentially bad for us. Luckily, the vast majority of microbes are helpful rather than harmful. And when we talk about the role of the indoor microbiome, the space around you, this too is made up of a complex microbial ecosystem. Things like airflow, temperature, humidity, sunlight, how many other people are in the room with you, are there pets in the room, are there plants? All of these things affect and shape the indoor microbiome. A healthy indoor microbiome is considered a more diverse microbiome, uh, similar to the role of the ecosystem in the external world, where we talk about the importance of biodiversity. The microbiome similarly is dependent upon diversity for health. And when this diversity is maintained, the potential for dangerous pathogens decreases. And if you look around you, specifically look to the door in the room you're in, on the top of that door is a little strip that is usually collecting dust because it's hard to clean. This upper trim of the door has been studied and has been found to contain thousands of different types of bacteria and fungi. And this is just on that door trim. So the abundance of these microbes, again, very much influenced by the construction, the layout, and the contents of the room you're in. The microbiome that you had coming into the room will be different than the microbiome you have leaving the room because it is being shaped by you and you are shaping the microbiome of the room you're in. And we know that the indoor microbiome can have an effect on our health because we come into contact with microbes in the room through inhalation, ingestion, or through our skin. So let's shrink it down, Fantastic Voyage style. If you haven't seen it, the classic movie Fantastic Voyage, where scientists shrink themselves down into a little medical spaceship to fight a tumor in a person's body uh, and have to contend with the immune system and all of the other little fun things that come with trying to fight a tumor inside of a living person. So check that out. So the microbiota, aka the microbial community within us, the bacteria, fungi, parasites, viruses, thought to consist of more than 100 trillion different microbes. Most of these are in the gut, but they are found throughout the body as well. A healthy gut is one that is diverse with thousands of species of bacteria. This consists of a balance of both helpful and harmful microbes. It's considered a unique and essential organ. And if you were to weigh up all of those microbes, it would be about the same weight as a human brain, about 6.6 pounds, or 3 kilograms for our international viewers. And it turns out we're actually more bacteria than we are human if you consider the ratio of bacterial cells to human cells, which outnumber our own cells 10 to 1. So the point being, the microbial community within us is abundant, important, and research is rapidly discovering the role that this microbial community plays in our health. And so that's what we're going to spend today talking about. But first, let's cover the important topic that is the belly button microbiome. Some curious scientists decided to collect samples from study participants, swabbing their belly buttons, culturing the contents in what is known as the Belly Button Biodiversity Project. They found that there are species of bacteria that are unique to the belly button, and that if you're wondering if an innie or outie is any different, they found the same composition between the two. So let's talk about that impact on health. We know that the microbiome plays an essential role in our immune system. It helps us to defend against dangerous pathogens. It helps us to process food and is important in nutrition and energy metabolism, and also plays a role in our behavior and our mood. So a few keywords to get us situated. When I talk about the richness of the microbiome, this is referring to the number of distinct members of a microbial community. So just the total number. Diversity is like the biodiversity. It's the number of different organisms within a community. And when the balance of good to bad microbiome organisms gets upset, when that kind of equilibrium between the good and the bad gets tipped out of balance, we call that dysbiosis. And this is typically associated with disease. And we can link disruption in the microbiome to a number of different health issues when compared to otherwise healthy people. So some lucky scientists have got the job of studying ancient microbiome by looking into these old toilets to discover what the microbiome was like in human populations in the past. And this has provided us with exciting new insights into the populations of the past, but also how we've changed or how we haven't changed since then. And studying this ancient microbiome suggests that our microbiome is actually quite similar, but the world around us is a lot different, and that our internal microbiomes have not kept up with the rapid changes that are occurring globally. So we are still kind of in a pre-industrial state in terms of our microbiome, and things like antibiotics, processed foods, and the modern lifestyle that we live is linked to this disruption in the gut microbiome, which then can affect our health. So things like genetics play a role, the environment around you, your diet, the kind of lifestyle you live, the places you work, spend time, all of these things affect this microbial community. And we embrace this concept of good bacteria versus bad bacteria when we think of things like probiotics. Uh, this can be found like in the yogurt section of the store. This is basically our attempt at regaining balance, increasing the diversity in your gut microbiome, and is thought to be an important component of potential future treatments of disease that we'll talk about. So, probiotics, and yes, there are probiotic memes. The WHO defines as living organisms, microorganisms that, when administered in the proper amount, uh, have some kind of health benefit to the host. So this can improve the health of our gut microbiome. It's found in foods like yogurt and other fermented type foods. The benefit being that when we have a diverse microbial community, that the good bacteria will outcompete with the bad bacteria. These are the common species that you'll come across when looking at the back of like a yogurt, for example. And we know that these can be helpful in helping to fend off pathogens. In addition to microbes in the gut, there are microbiome specific organ functions. We know that there are microbiome that are unique to the skin and to other organ systems. For example, the microbial community on the skin, on the surface of the skin, helps to protect us from invading pathogens. We're not born with a microbiome pre-built. This is something that forms in our young years. We acquire our first kind of inoculation of um, microbes from our mother during birth. We gain additional microbial diversity through things like breastfeeding, and most of our microbiome is set by the age of 3, but will be changing throughout our lives, as we'll talk about. And so a healthy microbiome provides us with a number of positive effects. We really can't live without it. And when the gut microbiome, for example, gets knocked out of balance in a state of dysbiosis, it can lead to a number of different health effects that are negative and that we are continually learning about. This is a very much an active area of research. Mental health is one of these areas, and I think one of the more promising areas of future research. And a lot of the research has to do with discovering the potential connections between what's going on in your gut and what's going on in your brain, and are the two connected? And it turns out the gut and the brain are a lot more connected than I think people realize. They are constantly exchanging information through the enteric nervous system, which is a layer of cells, nerve cells that span the length of our guts. Some people call it our second brain. And there is a possible link here between what's going on in our gut and things like depression and anxiety, common mental illnesses that present a significant public health issue. This is due to the fact that our gut bacteria actually produce the neurotransmitters that regulate our mental health, our mood, etc. Things like dopamine, serotonin, and so forth. The vagus nerve is an important component of this. It sends these signals from the brain to the gut. This helps to regulate digestion. It is a pathway for these neurotransmitters that are produced by the gut and are thought to influence mental health. So when looking at research into the microbiome and looking at people with mental health disorders, There have been studies linking this to depression, bipolar disorder, and even schizophrenia. So studies that have compared the microbiome of um, people with mental health issues versus healthy controls have found significant differences in the microbial communities. So people with depression have significantly altered gut microbiomes compared to healthy controls. And studies are looking into the effects and the possible use of probiotics to relieve depression. Bipolar, similar studies have been done comparing healthy controls with those suffering from bipolar disease. And what has been found so far is that those with bipolar disorder have less bacterial diversity. Anxiety and stress, a similar story there. Schizophrenia is a promising area of research. When looking at patients diagnosed with schizophrenia and comparing them to healthy controls, the throat microbiome is actually significantly different. And this is important for a number of different reasons. One of them is it might be a potential new biomarker, meaning something that we can identify and use to diagnose disease with. Schizophrenia is a disease that comes on later in life, early to mid 20s for the most part. And it is, up until now, kind of something that gets treated or identified once symptoms start. And these symptoms can be pretty disruptive to, um, a healthy, normal life. So being able to identify and diagnose this disease before symptoms start would be a big step forward. So using probiotics and assessing the role that the microbiome plays in neuropsychiatric disorders, some call this the psychobiome. Our understanding of neuropsychiatric disorders is far behind what we know about other health issues associated with things like cardiovascular diseases, respiratory diseases, etc. We know that some medications can help alleviate depressions of symptoms of depression, but the exact mechanism there isn't well known. So a missing piece of the puzzle could be the role of the microbiome. And it takes a lot of evidence to go from uh, association to cause and effect. So being able to take the step from the microbiome is associated with differences in depression to the microbiome causes differences in depression. For example, one of the criteria is biological plausibility. Does this make sense? Like under a microscope, can you connect the dots between what's going on in the gut and what is going on in the brain? And there is growing evidence to suggest that uh, there is a plausible biological connection. So researchers are looking into the possibility of a depression type diet where things like plant-based foods and antioxidants that boost gut microbes can also be a boost for the brain. Daily intakes of fiber can crowd out some of the foods that may be associated with dysbiosis. So if you're building a gut ecosystem, think of strengthening your gut like reforesting an area that's been deforested. Another well-studied connection between the microbiome and health is inflammatory bowel disease, IBD, which is inflammation in the gut. Research has shown that the microbiota differs significantly between healthy individuals and those with IBD. So the total number of bacterial species, species richness, and species abundance also significantly different. And that when we interact with different environmental factors and include things like smoking, diet, and stress, and take into account the genetic susceptibility of IBD, we gain a clearer picture of the risk factors. Allergies, this is another area that is undergoing active research. We know that in industrialized populations, this would include the United States, populations tend to have less diverse um, microbiomes dominated by a different kind of type of bacterial species than people from more rural areas. This becomes important when we remember the fact that more people now live in urban areas compared to rural areas on the planet, and that as we shift away from natural environments, we're being exposed less to the microbes found in soil, animals, and this seems to be detrimental because it makes our own microbiome less diverse. So, looking at, for example, children that are raised with pets in the house actually will have statistically less of an allergic disease risk, and this has been linked to differences in the gut microbiome. Exposure to dogs seems to have an effect on the microbial community and provide some protection against allergic and respiratory viruses. Uh, so this is further evidence that what you surround yourself with, if you live with dogs, for example, this can have an impact on your gut microbiome. Cardiovascular disease, another important health topic in many parts of the world. This is a leading cause of death in the United States. What role does the microbiome play? Let's talk about it. Obesity is a significant risk factor, and things like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, these are significant global health issues. And the role of the microbiome is part of the picture potentially, but we know that there is a complex interaction of different things like genetics, diet, the environment, but we need to include the composition of the gut microbiome in this as well. So, looking more specifically at obesity, we know that obesity um, is associated with things like nutrition, lifestyle, and genetic factors, but may also be partially attributable to dysbiosis in the gut microbiome. We know that these microbes are important in terms of nutrient metabolism, and that if we disrupt our gut microbiome with things like antibiotic overuse, then obesity risk may increase. Having a diverse microbiome uh, has shown in studies that it has a preventive effect on long-term weight gain in healthy individuals, and that if we were to compare uh, healthy uh, people versus people diagnosed with obesity, and even in lab studies looking at mice, um, they have something in common, and that is a specific deficiency in a certain type of gut bacteria. This may be an important factor to consider when thinking about designing health interventions to reduce obesity. We may want to consider information like this. Cancer is another area of active research. Cancer is a growing public health issue globally. And the treatments we have now for cancer are improving, but are still quite disruptive and can be destructive to the body. Things like chemotherapy and radiation therapy can have significantly detrimental effects on the gut microbiome. And so studies are now looking into the role of replenishing the microbiome to potentially improve the effectiveness of these treatments, or to help relieve some of the side effects that come with things like chemotherapy. So maintaining a healthy inner ecosystem with things like prebiotics, foods high in fiber, fruits and vegetables, stuff that helps the good bacteria, and probiotics can be used to help replenish the microbiome following treatment, and that a intervention called fecal transplantation may also be helpful. We'll talk about that more. Infectious diseases are also being looked at. The prime example of how your gut microbiome can increase the risk of infectious disease can be found with Clostridium difficile infection. This is an infection that occurs following significant changes to the gut microbiome and can be treated effectively with therapy based on uh, altering the microbiome or returning it to a state of healthy equilibrium. People tend to be more susceptible to this disease after they use antibiotics because antibiotics um, decrease the diversity of the microbial community. Studies have shown strong positive effects of the use of the fecal microbiota transplant technique for the prevention of recurrent CDI. So, what is this fecal microbiota transplantation I keep talking about? You may ask. Well, here we go. This is essentially like uh, donating a healthy uh, component of the body to someone who needs, for example, kidney. Um, if you are someone with kidney disease and you can take someone that has two healthy kidneys, transplant one to the person with the kidney issue, and improve symptoms. So if you're someone with a microbiome that has been disrupted, can you transplant the microbiome from a healthy person to restore the function and order of yours? So this is something that is known to have been effective, and humans have known about this for quite a long time. Records dating back to the 4th century in China show evidence of this being used for medical treatment. In the literature, it was known as golden soup, aka yellow soup, which might be the most horrifying name for anything I've ever heard. This is a video I'll post to the website. Check it out. It explains this process in more detail. If you're even more curious, I do a podcast and have dedicated 2 full episodes to fecal transplants. So check that out. So back to infectious diseases, mosquito-borne diseases like malaria, still an important global health threat. We know that insects also have their own microbiomes, and that the disruption of the mosquito microbiome has been proposed as a way of controlling the mosquito population. HIV, another important infectious disease globally. This has been a tricky disease to treat. There is no cure yet. Technically, once you're infected with HIV, that is a lifelong infection. And that's because HIV has the ability to um, establish these kind of hidden viral reservoirs. So, even in a state of dormancy, even if you um, test negative for having like really low viral load, once infected, you still have these small pockets of viral reservoir. And we know that people that have HIV have associated changes to their microbiome. They have less richness and diversity. And studies looking at HIV infected adults have found that there is an association between gut dysbiosis and inflammation. influenza, a respiratory illness that may be influenced by the gut microbiome because of its role in the immune response, in regulating inflammation, and our respiratory system has a microbiome that is also complex, and that if our respiratory microbiome is healthy and diverse, it can actually help us to counteract respiratory infections like influenza or COVID. Speak of the devil, COVID 19. COVID 19 and the microbiome, this is an interesting issue. And one of the things that's being studied is something called the hygiene hypothesis. This refers to the loss of microbial diversity that populations are experiencing, like in the United States, where there's an increase in urbanization, antibiotics and medicines are being overused, uh, birth and feeding practices, infant feeding practices are changing, and that following COVID, our kind of germophobia and our use of intense hygienic practices to disinfect everything has increased. And the possible link between the microbiome and COVID, I think, goes both ways. People that are susceptible to COVID 19 tend to have dysbiosis of the gut compared to those that are not infected. But it may be also that our response to COVID, such as social isolation and disinfecting everything, may impact or make more likely the dysbiosis problem. So let's zoom back out and talk about how the microbiome is linked to planetary health issues and things like urbanization. So we've talked about redlining and discrimination across different scales. This has been studied, and linkages have been found between um, discrimination at the neighborhood level and uh, dysbiosis. So we've talked about significant health differences that can occur as a result of things like redlining. And part of the puzzle here may be that the microbiome is being uh, changed in these communities. So a proposed solution is to make our cities more microbiome friendly, to do what's called microbiome rewilding, and to build what's called microbiome inspired green infrastructure. And this is designing our neighborhoods, our cities, our buildings around um, maximizing our exposure to diverse microbial communities to help us maintain a nice, diverse, healthy um, inner ecosystem. A big part of this is to increase our contact with green space. So, microbiome rewilding, this is a hypothetical area of research where if we restore urban green space and we rewild urban areas, um, this can be positive in a number of different ways. It can boost our mental health, um, but it can also positively impact our gut diversity. This becomes more important as humans spend less time in natural environments, and this reduction in exposure to natural biodiversity um, has been linked to a lot of the health issues we see today. So the microbiome inspired green infrastructure uh, hypothesis, I think, is very promising. You can define this as the living multifunctional green spaces that are designed and manipulated to generate health inducing microbial interactions, meaning we live in an environment that is helping our microbiome rather than working against it. And part of the issue may be our move towards germophobia, the perception that all microbes are bad, that if it's bacteria, it's bad, and that the more we disinfect, the better. We look for products, cleaning products that say kill 99% of bacteria and viruses, for example. Uh, we spend less time just playing in the dirt and exposing ourselves to the good pathogen or the good microbes of the world. And so, because of COVID and how that has kind of shifted our behavior to become more overly hygienic and more germophobic, this may be part of why we see our population losing its gut microbial diversity. So, I think to kind of sum this up, there's a healthy balance between uh, being too hygienic and germophobic and trying to disinfect everything and not being hygienic at all. So finding kind of a happy medium is, I think, key here. And so there are a lot of interesting ideas and interventions uh, to look at the issue of urbanization and health, specifically reconnecting us with nature in urban areas. This has a number of different health benefits. We've talked about the role that green space has played in health, and the microbiome is part of this. That if we reconnect with nature or natural spaces, this is a win-win for um, urban ecosystems and for our inner ecosystem. So that's it. Hope you liked it. Go grab some yogurt, and I'll see you guys later.